ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। So as you know, we'll be continuing our analysis of the 5 cognitive states of the mind, which comes under yoga philosophy. So as we have already discussed that these are just some important portions of yoga philosophy which I'm discussing separately for easy comprehension, and after a few more such discussions, then later we can take up the original aphorisms. That is a very exhaustive, it's a very exhaustive analysis. It's the whole Indian psychology, so it will take at least 2 or 3 years if we start at once. So now, just before we go into the subject matter today, just a little recapitulation. Last time we have saw that what is cognition? Cognition is the states and processes involved in knowing. So cognition includes all conscious and unconscious processes by which knowledge is accumulated. So cognition is a state or experience of knowing, and the nature of cognition and the relationship between the knowing mind and the external reality. So that is the answer to the question how we know forms a very important part of philosophy, both Eastern and Western, and it comes under epistemology. So this we have seen. And of course, it is the mind, the internal power which cognizes, wills, and retains by blending together the knowledge relating to sound, touch, light, taste, and smell. So all the knowledge which we gain by our organs, these are coordinated by the mind. Last time we had seen the example, suppose we see an elephant, so our eyes just see the elephant. Maybe it is standing at a distance. But as soon as we see that creature, that big creature, first the name comes to the mind, it is the elephant. Then its characteristics come to our mind, that it has a trunk, it may have teeth, it can carry big weight. So although our eyes have only seen the elephant, but all this knowledge was there in our mind by our previous experience, and all that is coordinated. So we have already seen that the self, the Atman, knows the objects of the world through these cognitive mental states. That is the modifications of the chitta. So we have already seen this. The self does not act, it only knows objects through our mind. Although the self really undergoes no change or modification, yet because of its reflection in the changing states and processes of the mind, the self appears to be subject to change. So modifications of the mind when it comes in contact with objects gives us the knowledge about those objects. Whenever I see something, the mind undergoes a modification. Suppose I see a chair. So there is a wave in the mind which tells me this is a chair. That wave is called chitta vritti or cognitive state. Chitta means nothing but the mind, vritti means this wave. So in the yoga philosophy, the word vritti has been used to imply cognition or conscious mental states. So these can be broadly classified into five such states that we have seen. We have begun the study last time. They are many and varied, of course, but they are broadly divided into five heads. So we have already seen what are those five heads. Just for recapitulation, I will again share the images here. So 1 second, let me share the image. So we have seen this, that there are five classes of such modifications. Some are painful while others are not. And these are, we have seen this last time, these are five: Praman, Viparyaya, Vikalpa, Nidra and Smriti. So right knowledge, indiscrimination, that means wrong knowledge, verbal delusion, sleep and memory. And we have discussed the first three of these: Pramana, Viparyaya, and I think we have discussed only two. Yeah, Pramana and Viparyaya. So what is Pramana? We have seen true or valid knowledge is called Prama, and the instrument of this knowledge is Pramana. So Pramana is definite and certain, and a faithful and unerring representation of the object. And according to Sankhya, there are three types of Pramana which we have seen: perception, inference, and testimony. So what is perception? Direct perception, inference, and competent evidence are proofs according to Sankhya. Again, let me remind you, it is according to Sankhya. Vedanta acknowledges six. There are six pramanas according to Vedanta. So we have seen that Pramana is correct knowledge. Viparyaya we have discussed last time. It is false knowledge which is not established in real nature. False knowledge means, suppose we see a rope as a snake. So that knowledge of a snake is knowledge, but it does not correspond to the real nature of the object, because the real nature is a rope. So that kind of false knowledge is called viparyaya. So today we will discuss the three which remain. So this is the first one of those three. This is Vikalpa. Vikalpa means verbal delusion. So I'll just. So Shabda Jnana Anupati Vastu Shunyo Vikalpa. So here the main word is Vastu Shunya. Vastu means object, and Shunya means where there is a lack, absence of any object. So this is a very subtle thing, this concept of Vikalpa. It means the knowledge which does not have any object as its subject. So it sounds a little but it is. We will just discuss it so it will be clear. So right knowledge means knowing a thing for what it is. Suppose I know this mouse as a mouse, it is right knowledge. But suppose I know this as something else, that is wrong knowledge, that is viparyaya. But suppose some words convey knowledge to me, but those words have no object at all. That is called this, what you see, Vikalpa. So a simple example is given in Vedanta that castle in the air. Now when we say a castle in the air, it does give us some knowledge, but it gives us knowledge of something which does not exist at all, which cannot exist. A castle cannot be there in the air. Or another example, stock example of Vedanta is the horns of a hare. So hare cannot have a horns. I mean, rabbit cannot have any horns. So these words are mere words, but they are used. We are using this expression like horns of the hare. When we want to denote the unreality of something, we tell somebody, oh, it is as unreal as the horns of a hare. So if these words did not convey any knowledge, then we would not have used them. But the very fact when these are used shows us they do convey knowledge, but of something which has no existence at all. So this is a very interesting pramana. So the definition of Vikalpa is the modification of the mind which is produced by some expression which does not pertain to something real. The expression a castle in the air does not pertain to anything real because there can never be such a castle. But still, it produces a modification of the mind when we hear that. That produces a chitta vritti. But that modification cannot have any real thing as its subject because that thing does not exist at all. So this is a simple definition, but we will go into a little detail. So this Vikalpa cannot be called a pramana because pramana is correct knowledge. Vikalpa is not. It is not. It doesn't have a subject at all. And viparyaya also, although it is wrong knowledge, but it does have a subject. Like when we see a rope as a snake, there is a rope actually. But in Vikalpa there is nothing. That's why it is called a verbal delusion. A delusion produced by words. That is Shabda Jnana Mahatmya Nibandhana, it is called in Sanskrit. Shabda Jnana. So the whole Vikalpa, this pramana, stands upon only Shabda Jnana. That is knowledge of some words. But the object which those words convey does not exist at all. This is an interesting thing. So one example we have given, like the horns of a hare. So another very interesting example given here, another type of vikalpa is, in Sanskrit, suppose we say, I will again of course translate it, but the sense conveyed by Sanskrit is much more simpler for those who know a little. So it says that Chaitanyam Purushasya Swarupam. So it is said in a roundabout way that consciousness is the nature of Purusha. Now we have already seen that according to Sankhya, Purusha and Prakriti are two realities. Purusha is conscious, Prakriti is unconscious. So in Sankhya it says, suppose we say like this, that Chaitanya is the nature of Purusha. That is, consciousness is the nature of Purusha. So in Sanskrit when we say it, we will say that Chaitanya Purushasya Swarupam. So in Sanskrit, this Purushasya, this is the Shashti Vibhakti, that is the sixth case ending. it conveys the sense of. Of. If you want to say that this belongs to this, then we use this in Sanskrit. So here we are saying Chaitanya is the nature of. So whenever this of comes, then this sixth case ending comes. So Chaitanya is the nature of Purusha. Now we say that what does this statement mean? That Chaitanya is the nature of Purusha. If on the words we go, just the bare words, it will mean that Chaitanya and the Purusha is something separate. Because Shashti is used when something belongs to something. So when I say this mouse belongs to me, then I am separate and the mouse is separate. So when we say that Chaitanya is the nature of Purusha, it is just a roundabout way of saying that Purusha is Chaitanya. Purusha is consciousness. So rather than we say Purusha is consciousness, we are saying consciousness is the nature of Purusha. We are applying this of, which in Sanskrit is the sixth case ending. But there was no need actually. So rather than say conscious is the nature of Purusha, we could have just said that Chaitanyam eva Purusha. Purusha is consciousness only. So these are very subtle things. So when we say that Chaitanya Purushasya Swarupam, when we say that consciousness is the nature of Purusha, actually does not mean anything. We could have just said that Purusha is consciousness. That's all. So this type of use, that Chaitanya, the consciousness is the nature of Purusha, is a example of Vikalpa. Because here we are using the term of when there was actually no need. It does not mean anything. So this is another, a subtler example of Vikalpa. Although there are words, they do produce a cognition in our mind, but they don't have any external reality. So this is the thing. It may appear a little complicated, but once we think upon this, it will become little clear. So another way in which this Vikalpa has been interpreted is by Swami Vivekananda when he has given this commentary, Raj Yoga, that is a commentary on the Yoga Sutras. So this is actually a sutra, what you see here on the screen. Shabda Jnana Anupati Vastu Shunyo Vikalpa. So explaining Vikalpa, Swamiji has explained it in a little different way, of course very briefly. He says, a word is uttered and we do not wait to consider its meaning. We jump to a conclusion immediately. It is a sign of the weakness of the chitta. Chitta means mind. So Swamiji says when somebody says anything, many times it happens that we say something or somebody says something, we don't even wait till the person completes the sentence. Immediately we jump to a conclusion. That often happens. So that Swami Vivekananda says is an example of the weakness of the mind. And that is called Vikalpa. We don't grasp the meaning at all. So that is the interpretation of Swami Vivekananda. So now we come to the next one, the fourth one, fourth cognitive state of the mind. And this will surprise many of us because it is sleep. Yeah, sleep is also cognition. So if somebody scolds us for sleeping too much, we can say, oh, it is a cognition. We were knowing something in sleep. And that's true also. So how we will see it is a very interesting study. So I'll just share the image here with those who are online. So here you can see abhava pratyaya alambana vritti nidra. Nidra means sleep. We all know. And vritti means this thought wave. So this definition is very interesting. That now suppose I know this mouse. My mind, when I see this with my eyes, my mind undergoes a modification. That modification is the form of this mouse. So I know that this is a mouse. Okay. So sleep, what happens? When we are in deep sleep, what is the object? If there is no object, how can the mind go undergo into a modification in sleep? So here it says in the definition, it says that abhava, nothingness, is the object of the modification our mind undergoes during sleep. Abhava is the subject of that modification, nothingness. So this is a very interesting thing. Now, how can this be proved? How can you prove that sleep is a modification of the mind? Because just by saying something, philosophers will not accept it. You have to prove. So we will go to that proof now. It is very interesting. So abhava pratyaya alambana vritti. Alambana means that which has its support. The support of the cognitive state of the mind during sleep is abhava, nothingness. So this nothingness is a positive entity. So this definition has been explained beautifully. I was really overjoyed because it is difficult to understand this way. So in explanation it is said, when you go into a room which is completely dark, you can't say you don't see anything because your eyes are open, you are seeing something. But though you are seeing something, you see nothing. This means what? The darkness only you see. So darkness is the object of your vision, is the subject of your vision, whatever you can say any way you like. So you are seeing, but you are seeing darkness. So similarly here, in sleep, you are cognizing, but that cognizing is of nothingness. Because in deep sleep, there are no dreams also. But there is a cognition. Why there is a cognition? We will see here. We know that there is a cognition by these expressions which we sometimes use when we get up from sleep. What do we say? See, we say these things, but we never realize the significance of what we are saying. What do we say? Sukham aham aswapsam prasannam me mana pragyam me visharadi karoti. Sukham aham aswapsam. I slept. Suppose we had a very nice sleep. What do we say? I slept well. Prasannam me mana. I am feeling cheerful. Pragya me visharadi karoti. It has cleared my brain. Suppose a student studies throughout the night, and then we have all studied like that during our younger days. Then we have some rest. Then as soon as we get up, oh, I have had good sleep. My brain is clear. Now I can understand. So this is one kind of experience. Another kind is, suppose our sleep was not so good, then we will say, I slept poorly. Dukkham aham aswapsam. my mind was restless, something like that. I didn't have a good sleep, etc. Then another expression which we may use is Moodoham aswapsam. So here we say that as if my mind was not with me. And Guruni me gatrani. My gatrani means this body. So my body is feeling heavy. I'm not feeling fresh. Sometimes we experience that kind of sleep also. Klantam me chittam. Klantam me means my mind seems more tired. I don't feel fresh. So these kinds of three experiences we may have after we wake up. So what does the Sankhya say? The Sankhya says that these three depend upon the guna which was predominant while we slept. So we have already seen the three types of gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. So they say that sleep is actually, we always sleep when there is a preponderance of tamas. Tamas, darkness, laziness, all that. It stands for that. So when we feel very tired, when we cannot think, when we say, oh, I badly need rest, then we know that tamas is overpowering the mind, the quality of darkness. We know we have to sleep. So sleep is only possible when tamas becomes excess. It overshadows sattva and rajas. But even when tamas is predominant, there may be three stages. First, tamas is mixed up with a little sattva. Then we say, I slept well. But if there is a little of rajas, then the second stage comes. That I slept poorly. And if tamas is only tamas, there is no sattva and rajas, then we say, oh my God, even after sleep, I'm not feeling rested, I cannot think clearly, etc. So these kinds of three differentiations have also been made of sleep. And we know by experience that sometimes this happens. We have experienced this. Now, we have already seen that sleep is a modification of the mind based on the absence of any knowledge. We are seeing darkness as it were. So mind has as its subject abhava, absence of knowledge. So it is a vritti or modification of the mind which has for its object of knowledge ignorance. The mind comes to face with ignorance. The mind is witnessing something. If there was nothing, we would all be knowers of God. When there is nothing in front of the mind, there is no vritti, that is called samadhi. But there is something. Although there is no vritti of the external world, we are not experiencing dream or external world, but still we are experiencing something. That something is ignorance. Now, the theory behind this, the proof is that, simple proof, that we cannot have any recollection of something which we have never experienced. This is simple proof. If we remember something, we must have experienced it. So here when we say Sukham aham aswapsam, I slept very nicely. What are we doing? We are recollecting our experience. What happened to me when I was asleep? Okay. When I remember something, remembrance is only possible of an experience. Otherwise, how can you remember something? And when you have an experience means you have had knowledge, because every experience is knowledge. So by this simple inference, it is proved that sleep is also a cognitive state of the mind. There also the chitta, the mind, undergoes a modification. It has a subject. What is the subject? That subject is ignorance or absence of knowledge. Just like darkness is something. Darkness, if according to this definition, we can say darkness cannot be called just absence of light, because we palpably see darkness. So here also the soul comes face to face with ignorance. So it is called, that's why it is said that ignorance is also a positive entity. Ajnana, avidya is also positive entity. So this is a very interesting analysis of sleep. So just we will go into a little detail also for those who are interested in Sanskrit. And we will also see the difference between the Vedanta and the Sankhya on this point. What is the difference? So here Vedanta says that, just let me see here. Vedanta says that there is no vritti of the mind at all. There is no mental modification at all. So Sankhya says that it is very surprising that when I read some commentary on this Patanjali Sutra, I consulted 3 commentaries. So in one commentary, they are emphasizing the Vedanta view. They are telling that there is no vritti at all. I was surprised. If you say there is no vritti, then how can you have a remembrance? So then I found a commentary which that was a mistake. So one commentary specifically stated that Sankhya says that Sushupti api chittasya eva vritti. In deep sleep also there is a modification of the mind according to Sankhya. But Vedanta does not admit that. What does Vedanta says? That in deep sleep it says there is only activity of Prakriti which is known as ignorance and not of the mind. So I don't know what this means. I don't understand what this means. Vedanta says that there is no activity of the mind, but there is activity within this ignorance. Because of that activity, we think we have seen, we think that we have had an experience. But even after reading many things, I could not find any further explanation. That what is this activity within ignorance? So for all practical purposes, this is the Sankhya view seems better, that there is a vritti, but that vritti has ignorance as its object. So when Vedanta says that there is activity in ignorance, there is no vritti, then Sankhya jokes about it. He says that, then why do you say only in deep sleep? Then you say even in waking and dreaming, there is no vritti at all. See, Sankhya admits, Vedanta admits these modifications of the mind when we are awake. When we are awake, I can see you, you can see me. So there is modification of the mind, Vedanta says. And in dream also, Vedanta says there is modification, because in dream we are seeing so many things. But in Sushupti, Vedanta says there is no modification at all. There is only activity in the Prakriti. So Sankhya says here, you are asking no Swagato how it is refuted. So that's why I'm telling. So Sankhya says that in deep sleep you are telling no vritti is there, but you experience things. Sankhya is telling Vedanta. Then even in waking and dreaming, why do you say there is any thought wave at all? You just say that you are experiencing in ignorance, avidya. Why do you admit that? So just think about this. I know this sounds a little complex because these are very subtle things. Hmm. So, yeah. But I found it so interesting that I want you to discuss. So when Vedanta says that there is no thought wave at all in deep sleep, yet we experience sleep. Because Vedanta cannot deny that we say, I slept very well. So if there is no thought wave, what did you experience? How could you experience? So Vedanta says that there was activity in ajnana, in ignorance which was there. So Sankhya says if in deep sleep you remember deep sleep, you say there was only activity in ajnana. Then in waking and dreaming also you say the same thing. Why do you admit that thought waves in waking and dreaming? We see no sense. That is how they fight with each other. So I don't know which is correct. Hmm. So according to Vedantins, since the intellect in the mind and its modifications are completely absent, then actually what we experience is because of avidya which is present and functions in a subtle way. And that avidya reflects the bliss of the Atman. That bliss we experience in sleep. Because in sleep we are all blissful. So that is called the Anandamaya Kosha. When we go very near God, that bliss of God is permeating. But because of this ajnana, we do not have experience of God. If ajnana was not there, then after deep sleep, we would all come out as saints. We would all be realized souls. But unfortunately, that does not happen. So, this is how sleep has been dealt with in Sankhya and Vedanta. One view, the Sankhya view says that in sleep also there is a modification of the mind. There is, otherwise we would not have remembered sleep. But that modification has for its object ignorance. But Vedanta says there is no modification at all. Then Sankhya asks, how do you remember sleep then? So Vedanta says there was no modification of the mind, but there was activity in ajnana. So that activity reflects the bliss of the Atman. So we felt very blissful. Then when we wake up, we say, oh, I had a very happy experience. So these are the two views. So we can accept whatever we like. And the final one, the final cognitive state, we'll just go into that. Just share the image. This is very simple. This is Smriti or remembrance. Just 1 minute, I'll share the image here. But in Smriti also there are some very beautiful subtle points which I would like to share with you. See, what I like about these things is these are everyday experiences, but we never think about that. We never analyze them. That is a very interesting thing. So, what is sleep? You can see before you, it is defined as Anubhuta Vishaya Sampramosha Smriti. Smriti means memory. So memory is when the vrittis, that is the thought waves of perceived subjects, do not slip away and through impressions come back to consciousness. That is sleep. Do not slip away, that is obvious. If they had completely gone, then we would not remember, we would not be able to remember anything. But since we can recall these things, this means that those modifications of the mind have not vanished into thin air. They are still there in the subconscious mind, they were there. So when they come up again, they act as. Now can you hear? Oh, by mistake I had muted.
There was a little bit of sound that came.
Yeah. My hand had, I get too much excited while talking, so my hand had gone there. So, yeah. No, it was not vanished, it was just ignorance. So from where should I start? That this much you have heard, no, that this we have discussed that sleep. So difference between Vedanta and Sankhya, I think you were there. So that is okay. So we were just starting our discussion of the next one, that is called memory. What is memory? So you have the image you have seen. So memory is just recollection. So you have not missed anything really. So we had just started this interesting thing about memory, that suppose we see a pot and we recall that later, tomorrow I recollect that I had seen a pot. So in Sanskrit they say we had known the pot as a pot means ayam ghata, this is a pot. Okay. But they say that this is not the only vritti which we have. This is not the only cognition which we have. We also have the cognition aham ghatam janami. I know this pot. This is an interesting thing. They don't say that these are identical. They say that when you recall two things. You recall the pot, but you also recall your knowledge of that pot. That I had known that pot. So here they analyze, now they ask the question that in Smriti, which comes first? When you remember the pot you had seen yesterday, what do you remember first? Do you remember the pot first, or do you remember the process of knowledge that I had known that pot? This is a pot, that knowledge, that process of knowledge is not the same as the pot. Is not the same as the feeling that this is a pot. So they say, they ask, when we remember a pot, do we remember only the object, which is the pot, or the knowledge? Knowledge means the sensation of knowing or the process of knowing the pot. This is another headache for you, for all of us. So in reply, the commentator affirms, he does not go into any quarreling, that is good for us. He just affirms that both are remembered. We remember both. We remember the pot also. We also remember our knowledge of the pot, that I had known the pot. Though knowledge is influenced by the object, though my knowledge of the pot is influenced by the pot, because that is the object. That is, it takes after the character of the object. If I know the mouse, then my knowledge is of the form of the mouse. But this knowledge, philosophers say, also includes the act of knowing. In other words, only the knowledge of the pot does not arise, but it is mixed with the experience, I am knowing the pot. That feeling is also there. So, remembrance of a thing experienced before, unalloyed by anything else, is Smriti, is called remembrance. But in that recollection of the object, a new awareness comes that I am knowing this. So both are parts of Smriti. Both the object as well as the act of knowing. So mental process of knowing and that object, both are there present when we recollect that experience at some future date. So memory can also be of two kinds. Remember us of things which are real, like a pot is real, but it can also be remembrance of thing which is not there at all. It is completely imagined. That we can also remember later. Our imagination of something which was not there can also serve as the subject of memory later on. So suppose we remember dreams. We often remember I dreamt of an elephant flying. So that object was completely unreal. But that can also serve as a source of memory. So in a dream state, memory of imagined things appear, while in a waking state, memory of real things appear. So all memories arise out of impressions. That may be pramana, right cognition, it may be viparyaya, misapprehension, it may be vikalpa, verbal delusion, or it may be deep sleep, nidra, or it may also be a former memory. I see something today, I remember tomorrow, I saw the thing yesterday. Then day after tomorrow, I remember that I had remembered the previous day. I hope that makes sense. So here remembrance is causing another remembrance. Yeah. So I will just end, no more of headaches today. Another very subtle difference. Very subtle difference between, very interesting, subtle difference between recognition and memory. Ordinary we say recognition means what? I recognize this thing as what I had seen yesterday. That is memory. So why differentiate between recognition and memory? Or pure memory. So they say no, there is a difference. Between only memory and between recognition. What is the difference? Very simple. Recognition can only come when there is an object in front of me. If there is an object, I recognize this. This is a mouse which I had seen yesterday. But pure memory can come even when there is no object. Like even if this mouse is not in front of me, after going to my room, I may remember I had seen a mouse. But at that time, there is no mouse in front of me. Only the remembrance is there. So recognition and pure memory can also be differentiated in this way. When one sees Mr. X, whom he had seen previously, so we recognize this is the same Mr. X whom I had seen yesterday. This is recognition. But when we come back to our home and then we think of Mr. X, Mr. X is no longer present, but we are thinking about him. So that is Smriti, that is memory. And when we are face to face with him and recognize him, that is called remembrance. So this is we have made a rather detailed discussion of these 5 types of cognitive states of the mind. So why does yoga philosophy discuss all this? To make us aware of all the things which are going on in the mind, so that we can put a stop to all these modifications. This is the main object. And of course, it is a very interesting study also of psychology, that what goes on in the mind. But yoga, the aim of yoga to discuss this is only one, that my friend, these are the kinds of vrittis which you are harboring inside the mind. All these remembrances, this birth, past birth, only God knows. All these experiences which you are having, and your aim is to stop all these. So now just try to limit those vrittis. Don't be very eager to go out there, go out here, see this, see that. Because the more you see, the more vrittis will be creating. The more impressions will be in your mind. The more you will find it difficult to control the mind. If you are roaming about the whole day, suppose, meeting hundreds of persons, this, that, then we all know that when we have a very busy day, in the evening, if we try to concentrate the mind, if you try to do a little meditation, it becomes practically impossible. So many things clutter up the brain. So many things have been going on. The lake of the mind has been in turbulence. So you cannot simply just calm it. So yoga philosophy says that all these things, seeing, hearing, remembering, interacting, if they are not necessary, talking, if they are not necessary, don't do these things. Because if we don't resist from throwing our mind into vrittis again and again without any cause, if there is cause you have to do, that cannot be avoided. But needlessly, if we go on throwing the mind, go on making the mind restless at every opportunity, then we'll never be able to control the mind. So struggling on a higher plane comes very at an advanced state. Because when the surface of the lake is disturbed, then how can you go inside? How can you see what is inside? Every day if you create a disturbance, then those vrittis which are lurking inside, how do you control them? You are not even face to face with them. You are busy dealing with those which are on the surface. There are so many waves. So first, at least reduce those waves on the surface. Some calmness the mind has to be brought into. Otherwise, you cannot even try to control the mind. You cannot do that. After sitting 3 hours in front of television, don't think that you will be able to meditate. It is impossible. Because all those things will be going on in your mind. No? You cannot avoid that. Once an impression enters, it enters. You cannot take it out. It is impossible. You can only do one thing, that create other impressions which reduce the power of those impressions. But if you again excite the impression again next day, then what will happen? I see something on television, get excited, spoil my day. I think, oh, tomorrow I will meditate. Tomorrow again I go and sit in front of the television. So what will happen? Those things will go on. They will never stop. So we will never be able to make the mind calm if we don't try to limit these unnecessary experiences. So how many kinds are they? I think they want to tell us that these are the things which cause vrittis in your mind. These are the cognitive states. And of course, the various states of the mind we have discussed, that vikshipta and all that. So our aim is to go to ekagra, that is concentrated state. But if we keep on making the mind vikshipta every day, then there is no hope. Forget about it. You cannot do. It is not possible. So, this is the kind of discipline we will have to undergo from the very start if we want to even start controlling the mind. Not advanced stage, this is the very beginning. You have to give up these. As far as possible, gather the mind not only for 1 minute, throughout the day. It will not do. If you do whatever you like, if we do whatever you like during the day and think we can meditate in the evening, it is not possible. We all know it is not possible. But still we try to do the impossible. Because we cannot let go. That is the problem. So that is the thing which yoga and other, not only yoga philosophy, all other philosophies teach us this. That knowing that there is no substance in the world, give up your interactions with the world as far as possible. Yes, this sounds a little strange, but you have to do it. We have to do that if you want to control of the mind. If we do anything and everything, go anywhere we like, eat whatever we like, think about whatever we like, watch whatever we like, mind control is not possible. Other things may be possible, not mind control. So on this encouraging note, I think I should end here. So, of course, I will unmute you after ending. Then we will have the songs and all. So let us end here today. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.